G'day everybody, this is part 10 of the Speed Passion LM1 build series. In part 10 we will be building the shock absorber or oil filled damper. Now generally, for those who have been subscribed to me for quite a while and watch my build series that I do, they'll know what I'll do is I'll build 3 of the 4 shocks, and then I will go ahead and film myself building the 4th shock for you. However, being a what they call motor pod style or pan car chassis, they only have 1 shock. So what I'm going to have to do is what I've done is I've carefully looked over the instructions before I've gone and done it, and we will go from there. So first of all, while I'm thinking about it, we also need this little tool. Now this is a Tamiya shock pump, and I said shock pump, don't get it confused with something else. So the reason why I'll be using this, it's to cheat a little bit in filming, cut down on filming time, and by that usually here's another Tamiya tool device. It's for shock building. What you generally do when you build a shock, you fill it and then you let the air bubbles come out. Now I usually let the shock sit for half an hour before I put the cap on and so on. However, we don't have I do have half an hour or so, but quite frankly it's just going to be friggin' boring. So we'll be using this little gizmo, and that's the pump. So anyway, let's get on with the building. First of all, what we will do is we'll do the first necessary parts. A little bit of shock oil. I like to use some other shock oil other than in the bottle, that way I know I have enough shock oil to fill the actual shock body itself. This is just a bit of shock oil from another kit. What we'll do is we'll get our large O-ring and we'll put it into the shock collar, and carefully put it in. Now what we do, a bit of oil, no, you don't have to put tons of oil, but enough to put a dot and then coat it like so. So basically, so the oil is evenly around. That way now it can be lubed up for applying to the shock body. So careful when putting it on so you don't cross thread the shock collar. Takes a little while to do this, and when we do it up all the way. You'll see why shortly. Okay, now the next part is we need a O-ring and we need a spacer. Now there's several spacers, so we need the white spacer and we need, now there are going to be some parts left over because they have, I got as many parts as I need, because it does come with a few little option parts in. So the white parts are the option parts. Now what we will also use, generally what you do when you put these parts in here, you'll use shock oil, but what I like to use, damn it, what I like to use is Team Associated Factory Team green slime. Now you don't have to use this, but I find that this works better. I find it helps seal the shock better, and it saves on shock oil as well. Okay, so what I'll do first is I'll put a little bit of the slime on the inside first of the shock body. Okay, now I'll put the O-ring in. Use your finger to push it in. And now what we do, put a bit more slime. As I said, I like to use this preferably, so I find it seals the shock better as opposed to just silicone oil. Alright, so now we put that white spacer in, and then we put a second spacer on. Butterfingers. Alright, so make sure when you look at this, you probably can't see it, but it has two sides. One's completely flat and then one has like a raised inner circle. So you want the inner circle to be facing outwards, not inwards of the shock body. Now what we do is we get the little collar and screw it on. And you'll feel it when you feel a click, it'll go loose again, and then tighten it until it's fully tightened. Okay. Now what we'll do next is we will start assembling the shock shaft. Now this is some part that you will have to be very careful of, because it has very small E-clips. So be very careful, and if you have to sneeze, make sure that the E-clips are on there, and then you can sneeze to your heart's content, because trust me, you sneeze while you're trying to put it onto the shock shaft, it goes pew! The next minute you spend the next hour on the floor with a magnifying glass and a magnet trying to find this little E-clip, so be careful. Alright, so now what we'll do is we'll get some pliers, carefully put the E-clip on. Okay, now we put the shock piston on. In the kit, this is like a Teflon coated one in the kit as well. It comes with two other shock pistons. One is another 3-hole like this one, the other one is a 2-hole, but for kit setup it says to use the 3-hole, so we'll use that. And also, before I put that on, it requires a spacer. Now we put the piston on. Got butterfingers today. Okay, now last E-clip again, very carefully put it on, make sure it's around the right way. Sometimes it pays to do it into the table, that way if it does slip and come off, almost like that, you won't lose it. Alright, now what we need next is another spacer. When you're doing it, putting spacers in, make sure that you've got a make sure that like the burrs on the end are filed off, and we put that spacer on there. What that spacer does is it limits shock piston travel. Now what we do next is we'll put a little bit more green slime on the thread, and the reason for that is it protects the thread from cutting, or prevents the thread from cutting into the little O-ring that's in the shock at this point. And also, and very carefully put it in and push. Alright, so now just with the towel or a rag if you have it. Just wipe the excess slime off. Now next part is we'll put on the little end cap, the little shock end. Now for this part what we'll need is some side cutters, and what we do is carefully on the end of the thread here put the side cutter right there. Now don't get it and crunch right down it, because you might end up cutting the thread off, and there goes a shock shaft, and there's only one shock shaft in the kit, so be very careful. Now what we do is carefully put the shock end on and turn it until it goes tight, or until it gets to the end. Okay, it's gotten tight. Now next part is to fill the shock. Okay, so we put it in the little machine, just a simple plastic container with little holes in it. We'll go into that one there. Yeah, it's a slightly. No, I'll put it in this one. Don't worry, I'm just muttering to myself. Alright, so now we'll fill it. What you do is you fill it all the way and carefully pull it out. Push the shock shaft up, then pull it back down, and you'll possibly see that there's little air bubbles in there. Now what we do is then we next put a bit more oil so it's flush with the top of the shock body. Now we put the cap on, and with the pump press down firmly. Alright, now you probably can't see on there. Oh, yeah, you can see how it's sucking all the air out. So that's what we want it to do. We want it to pull all the air out. So while it's doing its thing, there, we'll continue. And what we'll do now is we'll build the top end of the shock cap. So we need the main collar, the little ball end attachment. Now we need a little bit of foam. Put it in there very carefully. Now there are two ways of doing this next part. What we can do is we can leave it like that, or what we can do is carefully get our shock bladder, because what you can do is you can leave it like that, put your shock bladder on once the air's finished, and then put the cap on top, or what you can do is put the bladder inside and then do it like so. But I'm going to leave it like that. Now it needs a little bit more pumping. That's what she said. Okay, so as you can see, there's probably one or two air bubbles. Because of time, I'm not gonna carry on and keep pumping it out, so I'll probably just redo it after I film this, but for time's sake. Alright, so we just release it. Now what we do now, next part is crucial, because depending on how much rebound you want will determine how you push what you do next. So for this I want 50% rebound. So as you can see, the shock shaft is at its full stroke down. So what we'll do is we'll push it halfway. Now very carefully just move this. Very carefully put the shock bladder on. Now excess oil will come out. That's normal. Now we'll get our cap, put the foam in there, and then very carefully screw down on it. Okay, now I'll get another rag because I don't want to dirty this towel up too much. So now we just clean that up. Okay, so now shock rebound, when I push it in, it'll come out like so. So that's 50%, that's how I want it. And I don't actually hear any air bubbles, so those air bubbles at the top must have got pushed out, so it doesn't look like I have to redo it again. But as you can see, that's 50% rebound. That's what I want. That's good. Okay, now last part, put the spring on. Now put the spring on, and there you have it, folks. Easy peasy. So there we have it, one built oil-filled damper. Stay tuned for the next part. We'll be, I think, let's have a quick look. We'll be attaching the shock to the main chassis with the upper deck. Stay tuned, folks.